So I want to welcome everybody tonight. We're in February. Our theme for the night was work hard, play hard. And for those who don't know who I am, my name is Patty Schramm, Parent Resource Trainer Coordinator for the SALT Talks. So during this month, like I mentioned, it was work hard, play hard. So what we're looking at is in March, the first 3 weeks we dedicated to looking at employment. What services help? What do we need to know? We start out with Keith Banner. At the beginning of the month, he talked about your employment, your network, navigating employment. And then we spoke last week during our lunch and learn on the benefit analysis and the um, within DD service employment navigation. So tonight, and all of them referenced OOD. So I said, well, we are hitting OOD this month too. I wanted to make sure all the parents and staff, new staff especially, aware of who OOD is. So Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, and how they work in the whole transition plan, you know, and the whole employment piece because they're very crucial to that smooth transition as your child goes from that school setting into that employment setting and and on. So with that, I am going to turn it over. I'm going to let each one introduce themselves. And then I guess we'll start with you, Lois. Is that all right?
Yeah, so Patty, we are going to introduce ourselves as we talk about the different sort of phases of
Okay.
OOD. So
hmm
I was just going to give a brief overview, but I'm wondering if the individuals on the call, first of all, good evening. If I don't know if they can raise hands or something, if people have heard about OOD before.
They can put it in the chat too. You can put a yes or no in the chat, or you can raise your hand with a little reaction button.
Okay, all right.
Mhm.
Just to sort of have a sense of who we're talking to, right? So, so I just wanted to give you an overview of tonight and what our intentions are for this evening. We are going to first of all show a video about just gives an overview about opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities, and then we are fortunate to have OOD counselors from Montgomery, Greene, Clark, and Warren counties here tonight to be able to for you to be able to have a face with a name. And then we also our contact information is in the chat. Will be in the chat for you to reference in the future. So we're going to go over the overview after we show our video. And then each one of the counselors, myself included, will take one of the parts of the OOD process, explain the process, ask for any questions after each explanation. And then this is where everyone who's ever had a job knows that sometimes you got to go with plan B. So this is OOD presentation 2024. What do they say with the Apple iPad version 2, or you know what I'm saying. So unfortunately, the teacher that we had scheduled to be a part of our presentation had a death in her family and it had to go out of town. And then the young man who we wanted to talk about his experience with OOD services was called into work. So what better way to miss a presentation, right? He's showing responsibility. But we're gonna sort of cover the bases that the teacher would have covered and the young man would have covered just as a part of our presentation today. And then we'll have questions and answers. So if you don't mind, Patty, just showing the video, please.
hmm At large. You guys can see that okay?
Yep.
Okay.
You might think that the world of work is far off for your student. But starting to get a plan in place now will set them up for a successful future. We'll be there every step of the way. We're Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, the state agency that empowers Ohioans with disabilities through employment, disability determinations, and independence. Our vocational rehabilitation counselors work as a team with students, parents, teachers, community partners, and employers to help students gain the skills they need to prepare for in-demand careers. Starting at age 14, students can receive services including career exploration, paid work experiences, job coaching, and guidance on how employment may impact disability benefits. High school and career tech schools in Ohio have assigned OOD vocational rehabilitation counselors to help students get an early start in exploring career possibilities. Let's all work together to help students discover their career path. Don't delay. Connect students today. For more information or to download an application for services, visit ood.ohio.gov/students-14. Brought to you by Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities.
5,000 years of Chinese.
There we go. Yeah.
So just wanted to give everyone just an overview, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail about the different phases of our program of OOD. And what I couldn't think of before was OOD version 2.0, which I'm sure you will totally enjoy. So for our first person, and Patty, if you would put up our overview sheet, I'd appreciate it. Our first person that's going to talk about the first step in our process is Beth.
All right. So I am Beth Moore. I serve students in Clark County and also Madison, but I think that's a little out of your area. So our process at OOD starts with a referral. If you have a student in mind, we just ask that you make sure they're at least 14 or older. That's one of our basic requirements for being eligible, is to be at least 14 years of age, that they have a disability, and that they've got a goal to work one day. They don't have to be ready to run out and get a job right now, but that should be something that they've got in mind for the future. And Rachel will get into more specifics in a little bit about our other eligibility requirements. But if you're sending a referral, those are just kind of the top ones to keep in mind. Anybody can refer a student to us for services. We most frequently, being transition counselors, get referrals from schools. But parents and family can refer students, folks from other organizations. Anybody who's involved with a student is welcome to reach out to us and submit a referral. We just ask that you please get permission from the student first. We don't tend to get very far with a student and their guardian if they don't actually know that they're being referred. So if we call someone who maybe hasn't heard of OOD before, maybe the person who referred them had really great intentions, but we don't always hear back from folks if they're not expecting us. So just make sure you've got permission to send that referral. That tends to make things go much smoother when they know that we're coming. So to send one of those referrals, the video mentioned, you can get on our website at ood.ohio.gov. We've got a portal where folks can apply directly online if they are comfortable with that. They can print out a paper application and send that to us through the email, the mail, the fax, if you folks are still using fax. I'd say we most frequently get emails directly from schools about students. Sometimes that application's attached, sometimes it's not. As long as we have the information we need to get a hold of the student and that family, it's okay if you skip the application, but having that application does certainly help us and give us some good information about that student as we get to know them. So when we get that application, when that referral comes in, we then reach out to the family to schedule time to meet with them for an intake and an initial interview. We can invite the referral source. We can include the school or their SSA from the County Board of DD if they have one, or we can keep it to just the student and their parent. It's really their preference and what they're most comfortable with. So during that intake meeting, that's where we're completing the necessary paperwork to get their case open. So just getting some forms filled out. We do complete consent forms as part of that process. So that way we can connect with the other members of that student's team. And we can request any records that we need to help with that eligibility process when we get there. We also ask a lot of questions about the student, their medical needs, their work and school history, their interests, their goals as far as a job. We just try to get as much information about that student as we can during that initial interview. So we kind of have the whole picture of who they are and where they would like to go as we work together. Um, getting set up with us, that is kind of the big thing we do is that intake meeting. There's not a whole lot to get somebody in our door. Once we get that referral, we schedule that intake, we fill out the consents that we need to. And from there, we can move on to eligibility. So Rachel's going to cover eligibility for us, but before she takes it over, I just wanted to pause here and see if there are any questions about referrals and intakes, or if any of my team members want to add anything. And I've got my chat up, so I'll keep an eye on it for a second. And if I don't see anybody pop up or hear anyone, then I'll kick it over to Rachel in a second. Okay, so Rachel, I think you're probably good to go ahead with eligibility.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Spangler. I'm a vocational counselor here in, I cover Montgomery County. And so I'm going to talk about the eligibility process. So basically, OOD, we are an eligibility-based agency. So in order to be eligible, our clients must have a disability. They must be interested in working either now or in the future. They must need our services in order to find and keep a job, and they must benefit from at least one OOD service. So typically after the intake that Beth spoke of, we start the eligibility process. So when we get those consent forms at the meeting, we're typically getting consent forms for, the eligibility sources. So we'll request records, like school records. So we use the IEP and the ETR. Those are the ones I generally use since I'm working with transition students. And then also sometimes we might request medical records or psychological evaluations and things like that. But basically, we're reviewing that information to determine if students are eligible. Typically, within a 30-day process, we're getting that information, reviewing that, so that we can move to the next step of the process. So that really comes right after intake. And then, sometimes we might need additional information. So we're able to do that, or if we need to, do any evaluations or anything. But typically we're able to get all that information that we need from the IEP, ETR, or any other records that we need to request. And after eligibility, then we move on to the plan, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But that's basically a summary of kind of how eligibility works. So next we'll kick it over to Tabby, who will talk a little bit about the plan, which will come next. But before that, I wanted to see if anyone had any questions or if my team members wanted to add anything. And if anything pops up in the chat, if anyone can let me know, because my screen reader doesn't read the chat to me.
So I do see a question, which probably could be for either of us, Rachel. Amy asked, typically, how do parents hear about OOD? Do school teams have an obligation to mention it as transition services begin? Does the local DD office send info as the student turns 14?
So really, and Beth, you can chime in as well, or anyone else, but per my experience, a lot of my referrals come from schools. So teachers are mentioning that at IEP meetings. Sometimes we're able to attend IEP meetings as well. So sometimes we'll get a request to come to an IEP meeting and speak about services. but then, you know, they get permission from the parents to send that information over, and then they make the referrals to us. I have gotten some referrals. Occasionally I do get them from the county board, so they're able to refer as well. And then I have gotten some also from, you know, like the our online referral portal, and then a few self referrals. But like I said, most of mine typically come from the school. So we go to our schools every year and just talk about services and make sure that our schools kind of understand the process. You know, they typically do because they work with us, but I know with new staff coming in, we try to reach out every year and just kind of renew them on how referrals can be made, and, you know, encourage them to start talking about OOD services, especially once they're 14. That way they can get hooked up with us if they want to at that point.
And I would agree with Rachel. I wanted to clarify just a couple little points. You asked if there's an obligation from the schools to mention it. I don't think they're required to, but often during that transition portion of the IEP is a great time for them to kind of jump in and make that plug for OOD. So often I do hear schools mentioning it during that transition portion of the IEP is when they do kind of start talking about OOD. And then with the local DD office, we do get referrals from them. But as far as sending the referral, like as soon as someone turns 14, that's not necessarily what we'd recommend, just because just because they're linked with the County Board of DD doesn't mean they definitely want to work and need our services. So I would say often, yes, the DD does send individuals to us, but not every single person with DD services also wants OOD services.
The only thing that I would add to that is that I often see it, as Beth said, on that transition portion of the IEP. I often see OOD. We're going to refer to OOD or contact OOD. I see that more often than not. But yeah, what Beth said, it's not an obligation that they have, but we make it our business to make sure they know about us. So, good question.
And Rachel, we got another question. What are the next steps if a student is deemed not eligible?
So I mean, I've never had an experience, and, you know, everyone else can chime in as well, but I've always been able to make my clients eligible, you know, based on documentation. So that's not come up for me typically, because as long as you meet those requirements, then you would be eligible. You know, if we're able to, sometimes we might need to request like do an additional assessment. Like if we're not able to get the information we need, if there's not a lot of information about the disability specifically, then there's additional assessments that can be done, you know, prior to assist with determining eligibility, whether it be like a, you know, some type of neuropsychological evaluation or something like that, to help us with that. But we serve everyone with a disability. So typically at this point of the process, you know, we're able to find the tools to determine eligibility. But you know, Lois or anyone else, if you wanted to add to that.
I think I have had maybe one, but that was just because her medical condition was so severe that she could not work. But the way our services are set up, if they cannot participate at that time, you can apply for our services as many times as you want. You can have as many cases. So there's no one and done. So even if we do get started and it just seems like maybe they're not ready, we would close the case, but maybe we connect with DD, see if we can do something, or with the school to see if we can work on specific areas. If it's a behavioral issue, whatever that is, we're kind of connected to that degree where we have those conversations and then we just revisit when they're ready.
And Kyna, to jump off of your experience, I have only ever had one time where I had to make someone ineligible, and that was due to not being able to document the presence of a disability despite doing evaluations.
And I don't see any other questions in the chat just yet, so I think we're good to move on.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
awesome.
I'm just going to add. I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm just going to add that we at the start, unless again there's a medical reason or there's not a disability, like Tabby and Kyna said, we assume that everyone can work and they can benefit from our services. And until as the process moves forward, until until we have information that suggests otherwise. So that it's sort of the assumption that we make. But again, you do have to have a disability. You do have to be determined medically. We call medically released to work. I have had individuals who the doctor said they cannot work at this time. So, okay, Rachel.
Okay, thank you for those questions. And I'll now pass it over to Tabby, and she'll talk about the individualized plan for employment.
So my name is Tabby Hall, and I am a transition counselor serving students in Warren County. So when we make someone eligible, our next step is to work on our individualized plan for employment. So this plan has to be completed within 90 days of the date that your student is made eligible. We, on average, I would say, get our plans done in significantly less time than 90 days. But situations where it may come closer to that 90 days, most commonly might be if someone needed an assessment to help determine a job goal or any needed services. Your student's plan will include several key elements, and the first being their overall job goal. That's going to be based on your students' skills, their interests, their abilities. And for our students, we also include several areas of career exploration that they will look into prior to high school graduation. I think one thing to really note about the plan is that it's very workable. We know that a student who comes in working with us at age 14 or 15 might change their mind about what they want to do for a job by the time they're ready to graduate high school. So likely your student will have several updates to their plan as we go along prior to case closure. So in addition to your job goal, we're also going to be talking about needed services to reach that goal. And Kyna's going to talk about those services in a little bit more detail after me. We're also going to talk about who's going to help you with each of those services. We're also going to talk about our responsibilities, expectations while you're working with us, and a general expected timeline for completion of our services in the case. Again, this is workable. So if the goal changes or if further education is needed after high school, we can adapt our plans to match those goals. Does anyone have any questions on the plan before I pass it over to Kyna, or anything else my peers would like to add?
So the only, I guess I should take a survey. The biggest thing that I find with families and students when we're writing the plan, we have this policy called informed choice. So the biggest thorn in their side, I hear often, is who do I pick? I don't know any of these providers. Who do I pick for services? And I often say, I feel your pain. The choice is yours. And so as counselors, it's our job to provide you with the information about how you can research our providers. And that includes talking to them to see, what do they have to say? Do I feel comfortable with them? Do I think they would be a good fit for my son or daughter? There's times when I have, collaborated for phone calls with providers for a parent to be able to ask them the questions, for them to get some information. So is that what the rest of it you would say is typically the biggest challenge is well, maybe not the biggest, but one of the challenges in writing the plan and finalizing it is choosing a provider?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would agree.
And so for a lot of times I say, hey, you're the teacher has experience with our providers because they're in the school, they're doing our pre-ed services, or they're whatever they're doing. Talk to them about their experiences with our providers. As counselors, it starts our job to remain neutral. So I cannot tell you pick them, because that it's sort of taking it. It's not sort of. It's taking away your informed choice. It's taking your away you and your son or daughter's ability to choose for yourself. So.
And if anybody likes data, if that helps them to make a decision, we do get provider scorecards for all of our service providers. So while we can't say pick this person or that person, we can share their scorecards. So that way you get an idea of like what kind of population they usually work with and what type of jobs they're placing people in, and kind of what their data or their statistics kind of look like. And I do see real quick before Kyna goes, we got a question, is the provider the job coach? So the provider is the company that OOD works with to provide the actual service. So yeah, the job coach comes from the provider, the job developer. Kyna is actually going to talk a lot more about that as she goes through our services. So all the services that she's going to describe, the provider is the person who's hands-on doing those things.
So yes, I am Kyna Johnson. Good evening, everybody. I cover Greene County. I am a general counselor, but my caseload is mainly transition students. So I just kind of pick up where Beth left off with the providers. I am going to talk about the services, but they are just as much a part of those services. So with the providers, once we get the process started, like Tabby talked about the plan, you will pick a provider. Those providers are not random people. Again, like Beth said, they are different companies or different agencies that meet our criteria. We do have a set of credentialing they have to get through. So again, the biggest thing I think that would be helpful is just to kind of look at the scorecards. And I always tell my parents, call the providers if there are specific questions that you have. Have you ever worked with a person that has these sensory issues? Anything that's specific to your student that you have concerns with? Have you placed this many people, or have you placed people that may have these challenges? So we are huge, like Lois said, on that informed choice. So I don't want to say we're hands off, but the most that we could probably provide is maybe what they may not be able to do. And that might help. But again, those scorecards are super useful. But as far as the services, we have our core services, job development. Again, our goal is that employment. We want them to be employed in jobs that meet those preferences, whatever those interests are, whatever the needs they have, their strengths. One of our services, job development. Within job development, we will be working on a resume. We consider everything, all work-like activities. If they did any type of, I don't know, they do yard work in the summertime, they babysat, they painted houses with their uncle, if they do volunteer work in the church, all of that counts. So when we're looking at developing the resume, it's not just exclusively work history. And we're working with our transition students, and they may not have a lot of work history. Did they walk dogs? Like anything like that. So we were putting that in their resume. We're also helping them with interviewing skills. So we'll do a lot of mock interviews, just kind of go through those questions, giving them opportunity to answer and understanding those questions from the employer's expectation or from their perspective. We also provide on-the-job supports. So once we get that job placement, we will have a vendor work with that individual, and they will be on the job with our individual. They are learning or assisting them with learning the job to the employer's expectation. And we're also working towards them being able to do the job independently. So they're kind of going in, working side by side. At some point, we are starting to fade. We do want the individual to be comfortable, so it's not a hard, fast number or hard, fast amount of time. as long as they are making progress. If there is absolutely no progress made, we may have to reconvene and sit down and talk about whether or not this was an appropriate placement. So as long as they're making that progress, we're also looking to set in place some type of supports that they may need. So maybe in this particular area, they have 5 tasks to do, and the job coach is noticing they're missing 4 or something. Usually we'll just start with a task list. Most of our students, they don't use that task list. A lot of times it's just nerves. They don't want to make mistakes, but we'll put a task list in place. We also want them to be acclimated to their work environment. We're also trying to set up those natural supports. We don't want it to be a situation where it's just them and the job coach. We want them to know their coworker. At some point, they will be going to their supervisor instead of going to the job coach. And just kind of, we're just fading, slowly but surely fading out of the picture. After we are no longer physically in the picture, and at that point, the student knows what they're doing. They know who to report to. They know what their schedule is. They know how to get their schedule. If there's any issues, they know who to talk to. We're kind of working through all of that. Once we are no longer in the picture, we are following up with the employer. We're also wanting to follow up with the family, or we invite them, please call us. If they're coming home and they're seeming frustrated, something, we want to know if we need to get a job coach back in there. But that job coach is still in contact with the employer. How are they doing? Are they doing well? Are you comfortable? Whatever, just whatever they may have or whatever need they may have. We want to make sure that the employer knows, and they know that we're there to support them. We know our young people can do the job. They just need that little extra support. So once we have completed that on the job supports, we're going into what we kind of call retention, where after we're no longer in the picture, because our cases do close in, Lois is going to get in more into closure. Our cases close 90 days after successful employment. That successful employment time clock does not start until they are working independently. So the job coach is no longer physically in the picture. We are still open. We are still monitoring them. And we're looking at that 90 days as like a stabilization period, so to speak. We want to make sure they can work independently for that 90 days. If we need to go back in, we go back in. I've had situations where supervisors have changed. Well, this other supervisor, they may want things done differently. We know how that works. So we will get a person back in there, get them trained. Our goal is their longevity. So we don't necessarily get credit for just placements. So it's in our best interest to be front loaded with support, because the government will go back 6 months and then they'll go a year. And so our goal is that they have that longevity. And so we want to provide whatever supports are necessary. After that, we will discuss one of the huge can be an issue for us is transportation. Because our cases close 90 days after successful employment, we do not provide transportation. We do have services where we are trying to assist our individuals with driver's license or teaching them how to use the local transportation. For our transition students in particular, we do have job readiness training services. That might be a summer youth work experience where they're working 5 weeks. It is 1 job coach per 4 interns. We're just pretty much trying to see where they are. Are they able to meet certain benchmarks? Everything is pretty much industry standard. Are they able to follow instructions? How many prompts did it take? Did they require demonstration? Were they able to work independently if the job coach were to just kind of step back? So those are the things that we're looking at. We only do those once a summer, so we probably would not start. It just depends. Everything is case by case. We probably wouldn't start doing them when they're 14, because it's kind of early. We can make a case for them to do another summer youth work experience, but everything we do is based on need. So once they do a summer youth work experience, and if they're successful, Our next step would be trying to help them with establishing part-time employment while they're in school, hopefully. The sooner we can get them in those authentic work environments, the better. There's no book for good work. It's almost like you have to be there. So if they could work during the life of the case, that would be great. I think I covered things with service. So we also have auxiliary services that are kind of supporting, but those are our main services. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or if I missed anything.
So we do have a question in the chat, I think kind of going between the plan and services. Do you offer that information, the scorecard, or do you have to ask for it? So that is available on our provider search tool, which can be offered as part of the planning process. That is something we can go over during planning meetings, especially if we're trying to see if a particular provider would be a good match as far as what type of employment an individual may be looking at. For example, if they've had really high placement rates in the customer service industry, would that be a potential good match? As well as primarily what types of folks with disabilities are that provider working with? Some providers serve more individuals with mental health needs, more cognitive disabilities. It varies by provider, and that scorecard can provide a lot of that really good information.
If there are no questions, I will turn it over to Lois, and thank you.
So I'm Lois Mescher, and I cover Montgomery County schools. We do close cases, and the way we want to close a case is because that person has a job and they're independent, and we're past that 90 days after job coaching was ended. So they're doing great. And that at that time, we would also, if that person is eligible for DD services, and they are also have that follow along through DD, we would want to, well, we're going to include them throughout this process, but certainly at closure, so that they can continue to provide that follow along after OOD case closure. There's other times we close cases if again something comes up that a person cannot participate in services, or they're not interested in services, or they're not available for services. Those would be other reasons that we would close cases. That again, you have to be available. I've had individuals who, lucky for them, are get to travel a lot, and so if you're talking about an entry level job and we're trying to help you get a job, but you are on vacation several months out of the year, it could be a little challenging to help you to get hired someplace. So the best case scenario, you have a job, you're doing great, everybody, you like your job, they like you, everything's fine, and that's when we close the case. But somebody already mentioned it, might have been, I forget who. We are not one and done. If you need our services after we close your case, and this sometimes happens, and Kyna referenced, like if you have a new manager, well, let's say a business closed, or something else happens with your job is eliminated, you can always reapply for our services. There is no maximum number of times that you can have a case open with OOD. Obviously, every time you do have a case open, then we would have to go through this process, eligibility and all that, but typically we would have the information. We might just need updated information. What did I miss, or are there any questions?
While we're waiting on questions, I just wanted to add, I just thought about it. I have had parents in the past, they have concerns with maybe the job that their student picked, and they felt like, oh, they can do better than this, and they just didn't want to. I felt like it was settling. I always encourage and try to let my parents know, again, it's not a one and done. If this is a good fit for them in that moment, when they are ready to move on, we are available. I found that a lot of times when they are able to work in those jobs. It helps us moving forward if they have that established. There's some establishment in their work, so they actually have a work history. One, and they do a lot of growing, they do a lot of maturing. So just in case, there is a situation where, well, they can do better than Kroger. Well, they are learning a lot of skills. They don't have to stay there forever, but they are gaining great skills while they're there in those entry level jobs. And employers love to see work history, especially if they're young and it's very rare to see a young person at a job for 2 years or 1 year. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there too.
Thanks. That's a good point. So establishing a work history, and especially establishing it, if possible, while you're in high school. There in Ohio, they were doing a longitudinal study through Kent State, and I don't know if it's still going on, but what they found out from their research and working with students with disabilities, and they were following along with them for several years, is as if a student with a disability has more than one agency involved with them while they're in high school, their post-secondary, their after high school outcomes are much more positive. Along with that, if they have some work experience while they're in high school, again, their post-secondary, their after high school outcomes were more positive. So a reason for OOD to be involved early, and if possible, and if the student is ready, for us to support them in getting some work history, getting a job. So
Well,
I'm sorry.
Lois, we do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
What if someone doesn't like the job they were placed in?
Well, I would need to have a discussion about what is it you don't like. I hear, I don't like to, I don't know. I can't think of an example. I don't like to do this part of a job. We talk about, everyone has a job, parts of their job they don't like. So if it's a matter of figuring out a solution to the problem, I would encourage people to stay. It's not good to job hop, right? If it's not feasible or possible to solve the problem, we would take a look at, can we help you find a different job? But I would really want to know why. Why don't you like it? Why isn't this a good fit? And I think that's where the planning up front comes in, is very important. That we are trying to take a look at what is a good match for this person. And I have to say also, I've had young people say, I don't like this. And then if you give it a minute, sometimes I'm scared, or I'm not confident. If you give it a minute, sometimes I've found that people do end up liking it because, they like the people they work with, it's a good environment. But I mean, it's always going to be a part of discussion. And the other thing is that problems are a part of every job. And so I feel like it's important to, if you run up against a problem, that you talk about it and you investigate, are there solutions, rather than just saying, no, I'm done, I'm going over here. Because again, every job has problems, and it's problem solving is a good skill to have. My opinion. Anybody else can chime in.
I was thinking too, I've had that. And just like Lois said, the first thing we would do is just have a conversation. But if it's nothing where their rights are being violated, there's like nothing abusive, or I would try to encourage them, because there are aspects of work that we don't necessarily care for. And I do know, coming out of a school setting, a lot of times they're just used to kind of working around what they want, or maybe you don't have to do this much, but you can do this. And that's a huge hurdle sometimes to get over, because in school they're provided with a lot more accommodations than they are in a work setting. And so a lot of times we're just working through that, helping them make that transition from school into that real work. Because we all know, you can ask for vacation, but there's a process. I can't come in and say, well, I'm not feeling it today, or, there's a process. And so I feel like the best case scenario for our students is to have those supports in place, so we can walk through this process, how we communicate in work. You can't talk to your coworkers like you talk to your friends. And those are all the things that we work through. So we would, if there's nothing major or abusive or anything like that going on, we would probably ask them to stay and let's, like Lois said, let's talk about it, because we have to work through, because this is going to be work.
Sorry. So I do want to introduce one more person who is our surprise visitor today. And her name is Tanisha Reynolds. She's also an OOD counselor. Can you show your face, Tanisha? Tanisha was hired. Well, she works with all Dayton Public students. I don't know if she's on or not. Is she on?
I'm on here.
Oh, there she is. Okay. So I just wanted to introduce her because she is the counselor who works with, again, all Dayton Public School. In case there's any Dayton Public parents on, Tanisha's your person. Anything you want to add, Tanisha?
No, I'm good. I'll put my contact information in the chat if needed.
Okay. Thank you. So Patty, would you mind, before we start covering what our guest speakers were going to cover, would you mind just putting up the pre-employment transition services flyer? So this is one of the services that we can offer, especially for, well, you can see it says 14 years old, especially for those students that are pretty young, to help them on their path. And these would be services to look at their interests, jobs related to their interests, and look at, what is required on a job, how do you dress, how do you interview, but also it's called counseling on post-secondary options. So if you are interested in training after high school, what are the things available to you? The only other thing on there is instruction and self-advocacy. So often, and again, all of our services are based on need and want. I don't tell you need to do this. I might suggest it. But the services are based on need. So these are maybe some small steps that we would take for especially 14-year-olds towards on their path to employment, helping them on their path to employment. And we call them pre-employment transition services. So again, this is another, in terms of that state map, please don't worry about it. Just call us, and don't worry about the rest. Any questions about the pre-employment transition services or closure, actually?
Lois, I can put a little plug in too, since I've been worked with OOD many times as a parent. I know some fears of parents is, their child going to the work for the first time. But when you're choosing the provider, I know we worked also through the County Board of DD, but we worked with OOD as well. Doing the providers, we had our son in on interviewing providers. So we got to meet them a couple times, a couple ahead of time. And we also, when working with OOD, and I don't know, this is something I remember happening because my son had gone through Project Life and Project Search. And I remember in that transition from Project Search to getting that job, we were able to go out and visit possible job sites that he was interviewing with, and they let him visit. It may be for a day or, a certain time frame, with his provider or with the OOD counselor. So I don't know if you can elaborate any on that, but it kind of eased that transition into finding a job.
And so it really, all of everything Patty said is all possible. It is something about, and I'm happy to hear that you interviewed with your son, the providers, because they're the point person, really. Your son or daughter is a point person in this process. And we want them to be included every step of the way. And often I hear, well, they're maybe not going to understand what you're saying, and I also understand that, but can't leave them out of the equation, and don't want to leave them out of the equation because it is about them. So, thanks for pulling that up. And is that something you can put in the chat, Patty? Then the pre-employment transition services.
You want me to put in like this
The
one that
flyer.
you wrote out, this one, or
Uh,
this
the
flyer?
flyer. Yeah, the
Yeah,
flyer.
we'll have a link to all those that they can click on.
Okay. So 2.0 OOD. We had planned to have a transition counselor, I'm sorry, transition teacher from Centerville schools talk to us about her experience, the process with OOD. And again, I'm sorry to report that she had a death in her family, so she isn't able to come. But just thought, I kind of think that we're just kind of piggybacking on what everyone has already said. We collaborate. We are each one of us, the counselors, are assigned to schools, and we make it our business to contact the schools every fall. The goal is for us to have contacted every one of our schools by October to make sure that teachers, intervention specialists, special ed coordinators, psychologists know how to reach us. And I can't speak for Judy, but I feel it's a very easy process. They know they can just, if they've talked to the parents, as Beth was saying, and they send me, they have parents permission to send me contact information. They know I'm going to call them. And then I'm going to follow up and say, I talked to Mr. and Mrs. Jones. I'm meeting with them on Tuesday at 3. So feel like that connection, because we have these connections with our schools. And for Judy, Rachel is her contact, and Judy knows she can call Rachel. She can to refer someone. She can call Rachel to include her in IEP meetings, or can I give your phone number to this parent? They want to just talk to you a little bit more about OOD. We have these connections. We are all, and that's not just in Montgomery, Greene, Warren, and what county am I missing? Montgomery, Greene, Clark. Sorry, Beth. It's not just those counties. It's every county in Ohio has, every school in every county has an OOD counselor assigned to them. Again, to just try to, we know the importance of collaboration. We know the importance of that personal connection, to make sure that we are reaching the students that we need to reach. I don't know if you would add anything, Rachel, about Judy and how you guys work together.
I mean, I think you covered it. I would say, Judy's one of the teachers I work with the most, just because, we have so many students together. She's a transition teacher at a, super senior program, or a transition program at Centerville. So, I attend all their IEP meetings, so she lets me know about that. A lot of the students at that age are working. So, not a lot of my younger students are working, but by that age, most of those students are transitioning into work. So she's really good about collaborating and kind of helping with their transition from school to work. She attends a lot of meetings about that. Really flexible about students having, job searching meetings at school. And pretty much just is a really good support. Really just a great model of collaboration with her. But I think, I think Lois, you really covered it. I'm sure, maybe Judy would have had more to say, but I think we did all right.
So again, that collaboration is obviously you as parents. It's the school. It's anyone who is working with your son or daughter. It is team, and it is collaboration. So that again includes DD people also, if your son or daughter is involved with them. And I think Beth also mentioned this about, it's up to you who you have at these meetings with your student. You can include anyone you want. It is your right to do that. Include school staff, grandparents, anybody. it is your right to include those people. So it's my unbiased opinion, that we do a pretty good job of collaborating, and I do feel like we make it easy for people to refer students, and for again parents, you can refer students to us also. The only other resource or referral source that I've gotten lately are like Cincinnati Children's. I get referrals from them. I also get referrals from Dayton Children's. So people know about us. But anybody add anything to that collaboration piece?
Lois, we do have a question in the chat.
Sure.
I don't know if we want to answer that now or hold off.
We can answer.
Curious, during the intake meeting, is there more of a whole picture discussion about family financial situation to determine SSI eligibility? So OOD, we have a few different areas, and we are the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation. And so we're really focused on finding that long-term job post-high school. And under a different section of our agency is the Division of Disability Determination. We are not the folks on this side of the house that do the SSI eligibility determination. That being said, we definitely will talk about what financial situations may look like to determine who can contribute what to our plan. Do we need help with purchasing interview clothing to be able to meet that job goal? And what is the overall need for that student? But on our side of the house, we are not able to touch that SSI eligibility.
The only thing I'd add to that, Tabby, is that if your student does receive Social Security benefits, we can offer what's called a Work Incentives Plan, or WIP, and that WIP would provide you and your student information about earning wages and Social Security benefits, and how wages can affect Social Security benefits. So that is another service we offer. I typically do not offer that service until that person is ready to look for a job. I would want you and your student to have the most current information about, if you make this much money, this is how your check might be affected. And there's way more to a WIP than that. Information about how you, I think you guys already had through SALT, you already had information about stable accounts. I believe that's already been presented. But also, how do you keep your health insurance even if you start working? There's just a lot of information. So that is something that we offer. So any questions about all that? Collaboration, the C word.
So Lois, just kind of to help clarify for the parents, do they, let's just say their child is 14 or 15, or just in high school in general, and they just hear about your services and they do have an IEP coming up, do they have to wait until they've gone through the eligibility process to invite you, or can they request you to be invited to the meeting prior to going through eligibility?
If the parents agree to include us in an IEP meeting, we are absolutely can attend. It just has to be, okayed by the parents and the students before we can. I mean, that's just a matter of confidentiality and actually courtesy, right? Before they can invite us.
And as a parent, I strongly recommend that you invite OOD as soon as you can. That's why I wanted to make awareness of OOD, because I missed that step, and it would have been very helpful being able to make that transition. We did catch him before he graduated, but we were very late comers to the program. So I think it's very important I would think it would be very important to make it much easier to transition if you get them started with them or aware of them early, and have them attend the IEPs.
So Patty, I appreciate that. And oftentimes the teacher has said, hey, I talked to the family and the student, and they're okay with you attending. And a lot of times it's a good way for the family to see me, hear my voice, or, that kind of thing, to know who I am before, before they take the plunge. So.
And I think it's also important too, and just correct me if you get to know the student, if you start with them at 14 or 15, you get to know that student pretty well by the time they're graduating, and their likes and dislikes and their, maybe possible career choices that they may be,
Yeah.
they could consider. I mean, helping them with those steps and those choices, but you'll get to know them a little more personally.
Great point. And that is definitely the goal. The goal is to be able to know as much about them as possible. So I think we're just going to, again, pivot to, and Beth's just going to talk a little bit about sort of a case history and the young man who wanted to join us, but got called to work. So take it away, Beth.
Yes, so this young man was so upset he could not join us. He wrote a statement and emailed it to me to share with everyone, to just kind of summarize what he wanted to say today. So I'm just going to read this exactly what he wrote, and then I'll elaborate on a couple of points that he made. So this is from Fred. Fred says, "Hello all. I want to start off by saying I'm sorry I was not able to attend this meeting myself. I was asked to tell what my experience with OOD has been like and how they have helped me since I have been with them. I first got in contact with OOD towards the end of my senior year. I was on an IEP in high school, and my instructor at that time asked what my plans were. Once I graduated, I told her I wanted to go on to college, and she said that there's an organization that can help you manage the transition from high school to college to work. I soon after met with my counselor, Beth. She has been very helpful in so many ways. She helped make this process much easier. A few things she's done is help me find employment with a couple different jobs. She also helped me with getting some of my financial aid paperwork in order and also helped me get books this past semester. I plan on continuing with OOD as long as I'm in school. Currently in my last semester at Clark State Community College, and I plan on going to Wright State University so I can get my bachelor's in social work and help children in the foster care system. I hope I can make impacts on people's lives the way OOD and Beth have impacted mine. I hope the rest of your meeting goes well, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain how beneficial this program has been in my life." So I've worked with Fred for about 5 years now, as he said. He's a pretty cool young man. I got to help him out with some job development services there his senior year of high school. What's pretty cool about Fred, where he's progressed with his jobs and his job development process. So the first time he wanted a job, we helped him out with job development. So we helped him with the application, the interviews, his resume, with finding job leads. We got him rides to the interviews. And then once he was hired, we provided that job coaching, that on-the-job support piece, to help him get trained and settled into a job. And then a couple years later, he was into college. He was ready for something making a little bit more money. And this time, he asked us for help with job development again, but this time he didn't feel like he needed the coaching. He said, "You know what? I've got the job. I've, had a job before. I know what this looks like. I feel really great about doing this on my own." And now, as he's getting ready to graduate, he has secured his own full-time job without our help. So he has kind of built his skills as we've worked together and learned that job development process, and was able to do it for himself this last time to secure the job that he is at tonight and why he has to miss us. So that's, pretty awesome to see somebody building their skills and growing over the years with us. That's the goal, is that they're learning and, gaining some independence while they're at it. So while we love to have people back and they can have as many cases as they want, I think we love it even more when they don't need us because they learned during our time together. Another thing I just wanted to clarify that Fred mentioned, helping with financial aid paperwork. For Fred's situation, he unfortunately lost his parents pretty young, and his grandmother raised him, and he lost her after he graduated high school as well. So when it came time for Fred to fill out all of his financial aid information for college, he kept getting pushback. Oh, we need your parents' info. We need your guardian's information. So he needed somebody who knew him and his situation well, who could vouch for him and say, hey, he doesn't have that. He's on his own. So I fortunately was able to write a letter on his behalf for the school to show that, yep, he's on his own. He is not making things up and his financial aid paperwork is accurate. And then OOD has currently some additional college support funds that are not always in place. It's kind of a bonus college support award that we've got right now. So we were able to help out with Fred's books through that. And that college support award, that is just going to kind of depend every semester if we've got that or not. It's just some extra that we've got right now that we were able to help Fred out with. So I don't want to promise that to everyone that we'll be able to do that for every single person. It's a case by case basis and just depends on the year and the semester what we've got. But yeah, overall, that's Fred. I got him late in high school. We've got him a couple of jobs that have been really great for him, and he is well on his way to that bachelor's degree at Wright State now. So it's been a pleasure working with him, and it would have been way more fun to hear all that from him directly, I'm sure.
Great example of one direction that was appropriate for him. I was just going to add one of the neatest things that I've ever heard a young man say, and he is in an entry-level job, and he was real cautious about what kind of job he was willing to do, and this would not have been a job that he would have necessarily chosen, but he's doing great. And I said, just in our conversation about how are things going, I love my job, I love the people I work with. And he goes, I just feel really good about myself. And it kind of chokes me up now. It was one of the things that there's so much joy, there's so much pleasure that can happen from having a job and being out there and being successful. So we all have stories that are good stories. But that really we're just to our question. Anyone have any question time? We're kind of to the end of our OD 2024 version 2.0. So any questions or anything else that you would like to know about us?
I think I want to I forget which one of you mentioned, but transportation and stuff. We were able through OOD when our son had a job and a prospect of a job. OOD was the one that helped line us up to get his evaluation and to get through that process. Now, it wasn't like he got his permit and his license like right away. It was, I've said it before, it was like a 2-year process, but they assisted with getting us through that evaluation part and getting him behind the wheel with his temp since he ain't helping us get through that part.
So I think I've heard somebody say this once. I thought it was a good point. Not for not many of us have this straight line to where we end up in terms of a job. It kind of zigzaggy, and so that's okay. It's not always a straight to the top process. So,
And the fact that,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say to what Lois said, it doesn't always happen. I have had to close cases where they just weren't ready. But again, that's the biggest thing I love. I mean, we provide services, but I do love the fact that they can come back. So even if it's not the end of the world or anything like that, maybe we need to work on some mental health issues, whatever that is. Maybe it's their physical health, but we're always available. And so I've seen where students, they had some major behavioral issues, came back a year later, like who knows what happened, but it did happen. It came back completely different student, and we were able to work with them. So I feel like that is a super duper strong suit for us, that if they are not ready, it's okay, because we don't want to press. And I have seen in the past where the caregivers, I know they can do it, I know they, and it kind of push, and then it just wasn't a good thing. So our services are available for them to return if we don't remember anything else.
And I think one of the things when we had some job changes, or, that first job, they grow, your son or daughter are going to mature. And so their working and their abilities are going to change with them. We've seen that in school. One year we did really well in math and English, or science was low, and we had the seesaw. The same thing continues when they get into work. They start out maybe with what's one job and they gain the skills, and then maybe they're ready to go on to a next thing, or maybe they're ready to step back. But one of the things is, it's you can open, you can be the age, your son or daughter could be the age of 40 and can reopen a case with OOD. It's not something you have to do, and it's done. It's something that you can just go and inquire. And we quite often would work through DD. The County Board of Developmental Disabilities, where we were getting services. Our son was, hey, I'd like to try something different. And then we started the whole process again, and brought in OOD and, went through the process of job changing as he was maturing. One thing I wanted to ask too, and I know you had the one about the pre-ets, summertime, can you mention, do you have programs over the summer for students?
So we do have summer youth work experience. Um, for the most part, it's where we are going into different job sites. So it'll be local businesses. Like a couple of vendors we had, one was at the Beaver Creek Golf Course, or I've had some in Big Lots, or they're just in different businesses that are in the community. Where we're looking to see is if they're meeting specific benchmarks. So what is their if there are any issues, we need to know that too, because we're using all that information to move forward. So it's a 5-week program. It could be a 3-week program. I hope I didn't mess it up, because it used to be only 5 weeks, but we made some changes. So they do get paid for that. We pay them, it's 20 hours a week, whatever minimum wage may be. And again, it's 4 interns per job coach. They are taking notes pretty much throughout the day. It's not, I wouldn't call it a pass or fail. The only time I have had students to repeat that service is if they could not be left alone to do work. And so when I'm saying alone, the job coach is not physically completely leaving the space, but they may back off just to kind of see how well they're working independently. I had one student in particular, every time the job coach stopped, he stopped. So he needed that constant redirection. Okay, do this, open this, do that. So no matter how much coaching or how much training, how much demonstration, they still needed that one-on-one. And so because they still needed that one-on-one, the recommendation, so those job coaches will give us the recommendations at the end of the summer. Are they ready for community integrated employment? Are they not ready? And what were some of the issues, or what were the reasons why they were not ready? So for me in the past, if they have a case open with DD, that's great. I'm usually talking to them like, hey, they did a summer youth work experience. They're not ready for community integrated employment, and these are the reasons why. Is there something, and I'll also give the same to the teachers. Is there something that we can work on in school? Is there just something as simple if it's following directions or whatever the issue was? I'll always either go to my DD board or both, or to the teachers and say, this is what we need to happen. We can make a case for them for the next summer, but we want to really be working on, because these are definitely barriers to employment. So I went around the mulberry bush, Patty. I hope I answered the question.
Kyna, I'll add, this summer we're bringing back our summer youth career exploration option. We haven't had this in a few years, but we're bringing it back as an option to do some job exploration. It has some similarities to our pre-employment job exploration counseling, but is another one of those more group-based experiences where a student works with a provider in small groups to explore different areas of interest as far as careers go, learning about different work sites, that sort of thing. I think we're all still getting a little bit more information on how all of that's going to work, but it is an option we're bringing back, and I think we're all pretty excited about it.
So
Would a
yeah,
parent, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
just on that with the summer, and you said you might be starting up, does the parent, like, who hasn't a child that's been eligible, or do they just reach out to their caseworker if they're interested, or how do they find out about that?
So we don't typically have the information about who's offering a summer work experience until March. When I have talked to a student and a family about a summer work experience in March, when I have the information, I would contact them and give them the options. Here are the providers. Here are the work sites. Which one are you interested in? It is, you know, again, it's just that of course they always have a choice.
And I would say we do try to reach out to every one of our folks, but if you know that summer youth is something you're interested in, definitely reach out to your counselor. We definitely are getting all of that information together, but you know, sites vary per year, like Lois said, so we don't always have that super early on, but we'll work with you guys to identify what job sites would make the most sense.
I would add to all of the jobs may not be something they want to do. But again, we're just looking at skill building. We're just kind of making an assessment where they are. And there's some career exploration in that, because if you feel like, oh, I want to do stock room or work or something, you'll get an opportunity to experience what that's like. But if it's something that they just absolutely do not like, we do ask them if they can. It is their choice. But we are working on those skills. So we are asking for their participation. Now, if it's a disability related issue, of course, we could definitely work with that. But if it's just a matter of, I don't want to do it, yeah, we will kind of ask and we'll try to talk through that.
So kind of piggybacking, well, backing up a little bit. Michelle just commented that she found it helpful for OOD and DD, everybody to be at the table in the transition process. So thanks for that, Michelle. And that just commented about her son having support from OOD. So thank you for that. And then Naomi was asking, just clarifying, the student needs to have been approved for services before being able to participate in the summer exploration program. Yes. Well, not just approved, not just determined eligible. It has to be a service on a person's plan. So a plan has to be in place. That service has to be on their plan. And again, as we've said a couple of times, any service is based on need. Do they need the service? And hopefully I've answered your question, Naomi. So what we aren't is a summer job. So we don't want that to be the focus. It is the vocational rehabilitation process. So we want to know, where is the student now, and where do they want to be, and plan sort of go from where they want to be, plan backwards. What services can be put into place along the way, again, to help them support them on their path to employment.
And I just wanted to add to that. I've had students that didn't, that's like Lois said, it's really need based. They may not need a summer youth work experience. I've had students that worked before. They had some job experience. So we went straight into employment. It's kind of like with us getting to know them, what school's looking like, how they're like, what type of activities are they involved in. We're just trying to look at the whole entire picture and make those determinations, and not necessarily, okay, you're 14, you get to do this. You're between this age, so you automatically get this. Not so much. I have students, and may have 10 students that have the same diagnosis, but all of my cases are completely different. There's nothing similar, if I could say, about them and how we go about using, or how we go about doing the services. So it's a huge conversation, and we usually try to have those at the very beginning.
I'm not seeing any other questions, Patty, but if I'm not sure if there was anything else, since you're pretty familiar with OOD, if there's anything else you feel like it would be good for us to talk about here in our last few minutes.
I think after this session, or if you think of, if a parent, if you come up with something like, hey, I remember them touching on this and I'm not really clear, and you need to speak with somebody, you can go to their website and look at a lot of information. But we had put the contact information there in the chat, as Lois, and I mean, OOD is present in every county. So more than likely these couple here know someone that is, in a whole nother county. So feel free to ask questions. You can contact them and say, hey, I'm from this county. I'm not sure who to contact, but, or if you have a specific question that maybe you are looking at the website and maybe a little unsure, just reach out to somebody and ask. It's probably the easiest way to get an answer and get some direction.
A good point, Patty. You can call any of us. I'm going to make an executive statement here. Any of us. If we're not the person covering your student's school, we'll get you to the right person. We truly do try to make it as easy as possible. We welcome your calls.
Is there any other questions for our speakers tonight? I mean, it's a big step for parents to start thinking about employment. It's a big step to go through the eligibility processes. There's just a lot that you have to take in, especially when your child's in high school and you're looking at that. Graduation's coming, what about the beyond? Or maybe your child is out of school and maybe a job didn't work out. What do you do? Reach out to OOD. You also have your county board if you're working with them, and get with them to collaborate with OOD. But there's opportunities so that you don't have to go through, a situation where maybe your child lost their job. You don't have to do that by yourself. You can get support. It's important to, like when we had Keith Banner talk from the DODD and then the different speakers, having that network and that support system is very important, and to understand, the services that are out there that you may want to look into. So I'm not seeing any more questions. I do want to make a note before we end tonight. So we've been talking about employment. So next week we are going to be talking about recreation. The idea, work hard, play hard. The end of the month, we're going to be talking about fun stuff, because I know it's kind of, talking about employment, this whole month was, there's a lot to it, all the steps and, with everything. But we wanted to introduce you to a few camps and a few fun things that can be happening in your area. So we're going to be talking about that next Tuesday. And then come March and April, we get into Social Security, guardianship, stable account, special needs trust. These are all things that you will need to know as well as your child gets a job and you get benefits, what to do with them and how to handle the financial side of things. Plus, your estate planning and, it goes on and on. So after this month with employment, we'll be getting into the next stages of the benefit piece and, the other planning parts. So thank you guys for all your, for presenting. And again, parents or whoever's on, if you have questions after this, feel free to either reach out to any of them. Their contact information's in the chat, or if you remember later, I can always connect you with one of them as well. But I want to thank you guys for presenting tonight. It's always wonderful to hear about OOD and what you guys are doing. When I first started with OOD, I think you were known as BVR then. There's been a couple different names, so acronyms, but OOD has stuck for a while now, so it's a good thing. Because I got kind of confused there when we were going through it and it kept changing. But I want to thank you guys for speaking and helping us understand this part of the transition piece with employment.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity, Patty, and thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
you.
I'm going to hang on a few minutes for those who need to hang on if they have any questions for me. But again, thank you, all of you. It's great. It's great to see you guys and hear your presentation. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Patty.
you.
Take care.
Thank you, Rachel. Bye. Thank
Bye.
you, Beth and Tabitha.